Psikyo was a video game developer founded in 1992 who gained a reputation for creating shoot-'em-ups for the arcade, as well as console ports of some of these games. This Alpha collection brings 6 games from their back catalogue together, with the Bravo collection containing another 6 games due to release on the Switch soon. Do these games hold up to this day? Well, I'm Glenn for SwitchUp, thank you to publishers NIS America for the review copy, and now, let's find out. We'll start by looking at which 6 games are included, as well as some of the collection specific features across all games, before looking at the games themselves in a bit more detail. The first game is Strikers 1945, which released in arcades in 1995 and on consoles in Japan in 1996. The next game included is the sequel Strikers 1945 2. This released in arcades in 1997 and again released on both the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation in 98 in Japan, but this time also received an international release coming out in America in 2001 under the slightly confusing title of Strikers 1945 and in Europe in 2002. Game number 3 is yet another Strikers game, Strikers 1945 3, which was otherwise known as Strikers 1999, due to that being the year it was released in the arcades and the year in which the story takes place. Next is Soul Divide, which released in 1997 and sees you controlling a flying person this time rather than a vehicle, although its differences do not stop there and we'll look at those in more detail later. Dragon Blaze is next, which hit the arcades in the year 2000 and got itself a PlayStation 2 release a few years later in 2006. The final game in the collection is Zero Gunner 2, which released in arcades and for the Sega Dreamcast in Japan in 2001, and again is quite different to the other games in the collection, and we'll see why soon. In terms of the collection as a whole, every game allows you to choose from a range of difficulty settings, and you can also choose how many credits you have and how many lives you get per credit. You can range from 0 credits to infinite lives, so everybody will be able to see the end screen for each of the games by hook or by crook. Each game also has a setting to rotate the image on the screen by 90 degrees and therefore play the Switch in vertical mode, ideal for anyone who owns a flip grip, and this makes far better use of the screen real estate. Finally, you are able to play all 6 games in local co-op with a partner, and whilst there are local leaderboards, there are no online leaderboards at all. Strikers 1945 is set in an alternate timeline just after the conclusion of World War II. You can choose from 6 different planes of the era and must shoot your way through stages, fighting a boss at the end of course. Each plane has a different bullet pattern and you can pick up power-ups on the battlefield to increase your firepower, as well as your standard shot, which can be auto-fired by holding the A button or used in a more controlled fashion by tapping Y. You also have a charge shot of sorts, which is activated by holding down the Y button for a few moments. Any satellites you have following your plane will send out a barrage of bullets for a few seconds whenever you do this. Finally, you have bombs, which are used by pressing X, and whilst you only have a limited number of these, you will occasionally find more on the battlefield. As well as these weapon pickups, destroying enemies will produce gold, which can be collected to boost your score. Completion of the game will see you potentially earning medals for the score you earn on each stage, and you are also able to gain an extra life by hitting a certain score threshold. Strikers 1945 2 is very similar in many respects to its predecessor, although things have been ramped up a notch with larger bosses and more bullets on screen at once. One change though relates to the secondary attack, which in this game takes the form of a more traditional charge shot. So instead of the formation attack that was performed when holding down the Y button in the first game, you instead have a charge meter at the bottom of the screen which can fill to 3 settings, obviously with each becoming progressively more powerful, and they are fired by releasing the Y button. Strikers 1945 3, for my money, is the one that changes the formula up a bit in respect of this series. Set in the modern day, well at the time of release at least anyway, you again choose which of the fighter jets to take into battle, and as with the second game have a charge bar. The enemy bullets come thick and fast in this game, more so than either of the previous entries, and on top of that there is a new scoring system. Gold has been replaced by medals this time, and if you collect them just as they flash, you will build up a chain bonus from the second one onwards. This is key to achieving seriously high scores, and fair play to anyone who is able to build a chain whilst dodging the barrage of enemy fire. You certainly have my respect. Finally, this time bosses have a weak spot, a blue core that will turn red to signal the opportune moment to attack. Defeating a boss this way earns you a technical bonus. Soul Divide plays very differently to the other games on this compilation, as alluded to earlier. Firstly, you play as a person rather than a vehicle, as already mentioned, plus it's a horizontal shooter, and aside from these, its mechanics are also quite unique. Whilst it looks like a standard shoot 'em up on first glance, and you do fire bullets across the screen at enemies, you also have a melee weapon, and learning to get close to enemies and dispatch them with this is a major part of the experience. Some enemies will take minimal damage from projectiles, and therefore attempting to play this like a regular shooter will yield minimal reward. Your projectile attack is fired by pressing A, whilst your melee attack is triggered by pressing B, and 3 continuous taps of the B button will perform a combo. Defeated enemies will drop power-ups including magic spells, and your character will store these at the top of the screen. You can cycle through these with the L and R buttons and use one by pressing X. Completing a stage sees you move on at the map screen, and at times you can choose your path. I've heard that this game is incredibly divisive amongst fans of Psikyo shooters for being such a radical departure, but whilst the levels are very short and the melee mechanic certainly takes some getting used to, I have to admit I actually quite enjoyed it. Dragon Blaze returns to the more traditional formula used in the Strikers games, but again has a few new mechanics of its own. Firstly, whichever character you pick is riding on a dragon, and as well as your usual auto-fire attack and finite supply of bombs, you can also dismount from the dragon and effectively use it as a turret to assist you against your enemies. For me, this game began to have the feel of bullet hell about it, and is probably the only game in this collection that I would say that about, with Strikers 1945-3 being close at times. Zero Gunner 2 is the most recent of all of the games on here, albeit it's almost 20 years old, and you can definitely tell it's the newest of the 6 by the changes to the gameplay. Rather than piloting a craft which can only point and therefore shoot in one predetermined direction, you can now move your vehicle a full 360 degrees. However, the way you do this is a little different and may take some getting used to for anyone new to the game. Rather than use the right stick as you may do these days, you instead hold down the A button to lock your craft into place and then move to face the desired direction. Letting go of A will then give you a full range of movement whilst now facing the way you want. It may sound awkward and it will take some getting used to. I knew of the control scheme before playing, but had never actually played the game before and still died within seconds, but you do get the hang of it fairly soon, and once you do, it actually feels very intuitive. This is a fantastic game, the best in the collection in my opinion, although I believe that this particular version was built for the Switch as the original code was lost. I've heard that there may be a few minor differences because of this, but I've never played the original, so therefore cannot really comment. At first glance, I was a little underwhelmed to see 3 of the same franchise make up 6 games in a collection, but to be fair, it's nice to see the progression of that series through the 3 entries, even if the first 2 are quite similar. And I was also very pleased to see that the other 3 games had ideas and mechanics that made them stand out from other shooters, thus helping to round the collection out. Gameplay gets 18 out of 20. Controls are extremely responsive across all 6 games, with Zero Gunner 2 taking a little getting used to, and Soul Divide's melee controls also feeling a bit awkward at first, but on the whole they score 19 out of 20. When it comes to the visuals, there are a few different art styles on show over the 6 games. With the games spanning about 6 years between them, you can see the graphical styles that were in fashion at the time of each game's release, and it makes for quite an interesting and condensed history lesson. From the sprite-based Striker series, to the CG rendered characters of Soul Divide, to the 3D look of Zero Gunner 2, there's certainly variety through the games. Having just said that, the 3 Strikers games look very similar, and I had a problem with the first 2 games especially when it came to differentiating the enemies from some of the backgrounds. This may just be me, I am colourblind after all, but it certainly is worth mentioning. I also don't think it's too controversial to say that the graphics for Soul Divide haven't aged very well at all. Zero Gunner 2 on the other hand still looks very good, and it reminds me of a shoot 'em up version of Ghost Squad, and it's great seeing a huge mech climb up the side of a building as you shoot away at it. The music has certainly aged better, and each game's soundtrack fits the on-screen action well. I will say that it's a shame the package doesn't include any extras that delve into the company's or the game's history a bit more. A blurb of their release details, artwork of the arcade cabinet, or even some concept art, anything like that would have been much appreciated. The visuals are difficult to score with so many different styles that have had varying degrees of success in how they've aged, but they get 15 out of 20. Audio fares better and scores 17 out of 20. Psikyo Shooting Stars Alpha costs £35.99, €39.99 or $39.99, and for this price you get 6 games which will last you as long as you let them. Load yourself up with lives and credits and you'll blitz through them. take the time to learn how to play them and improve your skills, and they'll take a lot longer. Attempt for highest possible scores and you'll be playing for a very long time. That being said, the lack of online leaderboards hurts this aspect quite a lot, but local co-op play at least adds a few more points on. I think all of the games, bar Strikers 3, are available separately and cost about £7 each, so this is the cheapest way to get them all. There is a physical version, although I couldn't find it for any cheaper than the digital version at this time. Value scores 16 out of 20. To conclude, Psikyo were known as kings of the shoot 'em ups in the 90s for a reason, and there are 6 great games on this compilation. The lack of variety that 3 Strikers games brings is balanced out to a degree with 3 others that are quite unique. Some may see Soul Divide as a weaker game, and that may well influence each individual in terms of whether the package is worth it. Plus I do think it's a shame that there aren't any extras that celebrate the game's history, plus again no online leaderboards, but for me this is still a very enjoyable compilation. Psikyo Shooting Stars Alpha gets a SwitchUp score of 85%. Thank you as always everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. I'd be interested to hear which of the 6 games other people see as their favourite, and is Soul Divide as bad as it's made out to be? I certainly enjoyed it. Anyway, a big thank you to our patrons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.